Thanks very much, Marek. That was great and inspiring to hear how God's working. So, we've been sitting down for a little bit and listening to a few different presentations. I want to invite you to stand up with me, okay? Before we get into our next bit, get the blood flowing a little bit. Stand up, and I want you to see how high you can reach up. Just reach up, and then see how wide you can, without knocking each other out. Go. All right, move your arms around a little bit, and then you can sit down. Hope that gets you reinvigorated. So, we've talked about the harvest cycle. My name is Pastor Matt Hunter. I currently minister at Elizabeth Church. Also, we've got a church plant out in Smithfield Plains, Manapara area, and also my role is to be the church planting and urban missions coordinator for the conference. We've talked about this harvest cycle, but what is this? What is the preparing the soil? What's that all about? And when we want to talk about what preparing the soil is all about, we need to know what preparing the soil actually is. And I guess really when we think about this, through the whole of my module, hopefully you'll get a bit of a, first I'll have a bit of a philosophical side of it, and then some really practical stuff that you can take and implement wherever you are. But throughout this, I hope you get a real insight into what it takes to prepare the soil and what that is all about. Joel, is there a clicker as well? Is that down the front there? Oh, there we go. Thanks. Cool. So I want to ask a question to begin. My module, hopefully I'm pointing in the right direction. Am I pointing somewhere in particular, Joel? Sorry. Oh, there we go. I'm pressing the wrong button. Okay, there we go. So I want you to think about this. What is the biggest barrier to growth in our church? I want you to get your mental juices flowing and thinking. What is the biggest barrier to growth in our church?
I'm going to guess it. This is me.
Oh, okay. Me?
That I'm afraid to be rejected.
Okay. You know, this is really powerful. Afraid to be rejected. How many other people can resonate with that? I can. 100%. It's an innate human fear. Absolutely. Love your answer. And just saying this, I don't want to say this in the sense that, you know, there's right or wrong answers. I want to hear your answers. I'll give you one of the answers that I have, which is not the answer, but an answer. But I want you to think through this. What are some of the biggest barriers to growth in our church? Me is a great one. Yes? You don't think you have enough Bible knowledge? Yeah. Yeah, feeling inadequate to be able to share? Yes. Down the very back if you can make yourself loud. Prayer? Yeah. Not enough prayer? Absolutely. Yeah. Losing friends. The fear of losing friends, absolutely. Yes. Complacency. Yeah. Feeling comfortable with how things are and not how things, having that desire for how things should be.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the fear of trying something different, we're always doing the same thing. I feel like we get stuck in a space where we're afraid to try something different.
Fear of trying something different. We've got a hand up the back. Worldliness. Okay. Yeah. Next. Conflict. Lukewarm church. Yeah. Yeah, lukewarm era. We've got uncommitted Christians, yeah.
Just focusing on catching up with the people that you haven't seen for a week instead of meeting new people.
Yeah, becomes a social club, catching up with the people who I haven't seen for a week. Okay. They're really good. And you've probably, one more up the back there, yep. See, people are too lethargic and asleep. So moving on a little bit, they're all true. And I guess the thing is that there's always an answer that's going to be true for you, for me, for all of us in some senses. But I want to give an answer that I think is really significant to us as a church in the perspective of looking at preparing the soil. Preparing the soil is that first part of the cycle. And I want to acknowledge that I'm not going to be touching on sowing seed. Okay, so our mind is going to constantly want to go towards sowing seed. How do I do that? But let's resist the urge to do that just today, because we want to focus on preparing the soil and what that's all about. So what I want to show you is one of the reasons why I think that one of the biggest barriers we have is that we misunderstand what it means to prepare the soil and to sow the seed. And a lot of our evangelistic efforts are wasteful because we don't understand what this harvest cycle is about at all. We're faithful, we do lots of stuff, but a lot of it is wasteful. And I've got an illustration. You know what? I'm really grateful to God for all my failures because they end up being some of the best illustrations. I want to show you something. This is my home. At home. This is a veggie patch that my wife and my family and I created last year. Now, we've got a lot of projects around our house, so I want to just acknowledge that we haven't spent a lot of time on this veggie patch because we've been doing lots of other stuff. But we created this veggie patch. The idea was that we're going to start growing our own food, and we wanted to grow food that was organic as well, so we could harvest the seeds and use the seeds for the next, keep recycling them. So we spent some time selecting an area we were going to do it. For the gardeners of you, please don't look at this and start analysing what we did wrong. Okay? I'm sure we can pick on a whole heap of things, but that's okay. But we selected an area, we put a fence around it. There's lots of rabbits in our area, to just protect that area from the rabbits. We also got some different soil brought in, some good soil brought in. We covered the area with that soil. I put in a watering system, and I also started to dig up some of the soil, create rows, and then we got some of our seed and we put a whole heap of seed in. And let me show you the results of our first harvest. Now, if you don't notice, just a couple of weekends ago, there was weeds that grew up and we just let them grow. It was not a big drama. We were pulling out all of our weeds because, guess what? We planted a whole heap of stuff. We had our watering system going and nothing grew. Well, so we thought, until we pulled out all the weeds and we found this. I don't know if you can see it just yet. This is what we found. Does anyone know what it is? Broccoli. It's broccoli. And I want to show you how brilliant and how amazing and how awe-inspiring this broccoli is. If I zoom up, oh, it's gone. Go back. I think that's, if you notice, I might have sent it without the zoomed up picture. Do you notice the broccoli heads on there? Anyone see it? There are broccoli heads on there. They are tiny. Tiny. Thank you. Thank you. I was waiting. I think I do as well. The amazing thing was that after about a month, I kind of gave up on anything growing. I switched the watering system off and that still grew, pretty amazing. I was neglectful of this whole veggie patch and that still grew. That's quite amazing. Anyway. The problem, where did I fail? Why did this fail so much? I'll tell you really honestly why this failed. Because when I was preparing this veggie patch, yes, I brought some soil in. I didn't really probably bring enough of it in or enough of the fertiliser in. But when I was preparing this, I pretty much scratched the surface. I didn't really spend hours and hours. You know what it would take for this really to become fertile? Is I would have to have dedicated hours and hours to getting in there, to digging all that soil over, and getting even more fertiliser, putting it in, and digging it over, and digging it over. In fact, do you know what the farmer's shortcut is to digging over their veggie patches are? A lot of farmers out there, they go and get a pig and they put it in there for a while. Why? Because what does a pig do? It turns the soil over and over and over and over. What does it take to prepare the soil like that? It takes commitment, it takes sweat, it takes the willingness to get smelly and dirty. And I didn't have that willingness to really do it. I made a pretty pathetic attempt, to be honest. It was a token effort. And look at the results. A lot of our evangelism is not really preceded by genuine attempts to prepare the soil, because we're not willing to get dirty, to get smelly, and to get sweaty and actually commit serious time to it. So what we do is we make a token attempt and we sow lots of seeds, and then this is the result. Not much grows, and then we get tiny little, look at the little bits of broccoli that are growing on the top. And sometimes it grows in spite of my neglect of it. I don't know if anything's ringing a bell. It rings a bell with me in my heart too. So, when I think about this, I think about Jesus. When Jesus came to this earth, did he come wearing I'm talking philosophically here. Did he come wearing a suit or did he come wearing overalls? Did he come in his priestly garments or did he come to till the soil, to prepare the soil, to really commit to getting down in the dirt and digging that sod over and pulling the stuff the hard soil, breaking up that hard soil that's on the top and digging down to unleash what's underneath? What did he do? There's a really famous Ellen G. White statement that I'm sure you've heard millions of times before, but it helps us in understanding what preparing the soil is about. You've seen this. Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. The Saviour, what? And I've broken this down line by line. What did he do? He mingled with people as one who desired their good. He showed sympathy for them, he ministered to their needs and won their confidence. Then he invited them, come follow me. How many of those steps are sowing? How many of those steps are preparing? I want you to think about that. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Jesus tells us in Matthew 16 what would ensure the success of this church. What does he say? He says, I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Now we know it's not Peter the disciple. We know that we can talk about many different various things. You know, the rock that he builds his church, it's himself. It's the truth about himself. It's all those things, you know. And he says something really interesting. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. What I want to focus on here as we think about this is for years, probably most of my ministry fundamentally misunderstood this statement. Because when I read that, the picture in my mind that the success of the church, that he would build his church, great, he would build his church on himself, awesome, got all of that, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it. You know what I thought to myself when I read that passage? I always had this picture in my head that this picture that we, his church, are, we're huddled together and we have a wall around us that God's created protecting us from the fiery arrows of the devil. But I want to ask you a question. Gates, what are gates used for? Are they attacking or defensive mechanisms? They're defensive mechanisms. Who do these gates belong to? The gates of hell. This is not a picture of hell attacking the church because he says the gates of hell will not prevail against who? His church. What are we doing if the gates of hell won't prevail against us? Gates are defensive mechanisms. The defensive mechanism of what? Hell, the kingdom of Satan, which the kingdom of this world is. It's not a picture of God's people huddled together, safely protected. It's actually a picture of us girding our loins, getting up and going out into the world. Because where does the kingdom of God live? Does the kingdom, God didn't come to the earth to develop a physical kingdom. Where does the kingdom of God live? In our hearts. Where does the kingdom of hell live? Where? People's hearts. We're warriors for him going out, and we are freeing people from the kingdom of hell. And he says that when we fight with his armour, the kingdom of hell won't prevail against his truth. It will set people free. Let's flip. Let's in our minds flip the narrative. Right? How do we often think about ourselves? Hey, let's all huddle together and be safe. Really? You reckon that's what Jesus came to do, is to set us in the church and safe and put a big wall around us so we never... Oh, come on. There's so many pictures. Salt. Be salt out of the salt shaker. Right? This is all essentially a part of preparing the soil. We need to be out there in people's lives. In the soil, preparing the soil, turning it over, getting dirty, getting smelly. Another way I think about it is the idea of a virus. We have a Jesus virus to share with people, and we can't effectively spread it while we continually to socially distance and wear our masks to protect ourselves, our sensitive senses, from the stench of the world. Can you spread the virus while wearing a mask and socially distancing? Maybe. If it's viral enough. But you see my point, right? We're so worried about socially distancing and wearing our masks. We've got a positive virus to spread, the virus of the kingdom, that hopefully will spread around the whole world. So, how do we actually prepare the soil? How do we prepare the soil? We'll go back to the statement of Ellen White. Notice the things. I'm going to highlight a few things that she said. She said that the Saviour did what? Mingled with the people. How did he mingle? What was the motive for the mingling? To do what? While desiring their good. Where is your focus? Is your focus on your agenda, or is your focus on their good? Mingling doesn't work when it's just focused on your agenda, right? We need to mingle as one who genuinely is desiring their good. The next part is that he showed what? Sympathy for them. What is another way of thinking about sympathy? The way I think about it is listening, right? Listening, genuinely listening to them. He ministered to their needs, and then he won their confidence, and he invited them, come follow me. Those first 5 lines are preparing the soil. The last one is planting the seed. Sometimes, as a church, I think we spend 5 times as much sowing seed as we do preparing soil. But what does that show? How much should it be? 5 times as much time preparing the soil as sowing seed. And I'm not denying sowing the seed or the importance of it, but what am I focused on today? Effective preparing of the soil. We've got to get this right. So, mingling. What do we often think this means or looks like? Who are we mingling with, and what is the goal of it? So there's the 3 things that are part of preparing the soil. Mingling, listening, and acting. Mingling, listening, and acting. And today, I'm going to be focusing on especially those first 2, especially. So what is the point? I want to ask you guys, what's the point of mingling? Why do we mingle with people? What should be the ultimate goal in our mingling with people? Making friends? Finding out what their needs are. No, that's the next step. Step 2. Good, but yeah, sorry. I love it. Increasing the size of your family. You know what? I'm really inspired. I think Marek's gone. Is Marek gone? Is he still here? He's gone. I love that photo of him with those guys at his house. And what did they say? This is the best day I've had. What did they do? Man, they just ate and they had fun. It looked like fun. And I was like, Marek, can you invite me to the next one of those gatherings? I'd love it. We need to have a broad focus as well when we mingle. And we need to think about our language. Now, I'm not saying this pointing at anyone, I say this pointing at myself. There's a word we use that I cringe every time I hear. When we use the word, like our language matters, when we use the word contact, right? Imagine inviting someone to your home and saying, I'm so glad you've become a contact of mine. Would you like to continue to be a contact of mine? Let's start to use language that means what our goal is. Friends. You know, we're genuinely building relationships with people. They're not just a contact that we kind of know. You know, I've got contacts in my phone. I don't call very many of them all the time. But friends, and I'm not saying Facebook friends, genuine friends, it's different. So, we need to be really genuine in making relationships. And the purpose of mingling is to get to know them, not for them to get to know us. There's a really interesting piece of research that was looking into people's social interactions. They put people in a social interaction where it was like speed dating. They went and spent about 15 to 20 minutes with a whole heap of different people. And there were some people that were told to talk a lot about themselves, and there were other people that were told purely just to ask questions of the other people. So there was one group of people, they were supposed to be doing a particular thing. The other group were just coming in to be part of this, you know, mingling and interacting. So one group were just to talk about themselves, the other group were just to ask questions of the others, and they surveyed the people afterwards how they felt, who they felt closest to. The really interesting thing was they said, how well do you know the other person? The question they were asking is, which person did you get to know better? The person who talked about themselves or the person who just asked you questions? You know the amazing thing was, with almost every single one of them, they said the person I got to know better was the person who just asked me questions. You know the irony of that is, they actually got to know nothing about the other person. They said, I got to know that person really well, but the reality is they knew nothing about them. Why? Because the person showed interest in them, and that made them feel close to them. The object of mingling is to get to know them, not to share information with them. I'm not saying don't share information, but that's the goal of mingling, to get to know them. Too often we're more concerned with what we want to tell them than truly getting to know them. Also, the other thing I want to challenge you with, the idea of, is to mingle with a broad group of people. I want you to think about, and there are some questions we're going to go through a little bit later in your groups. Think about the people in your community and the people groups in your community. Who are the people in your local community that you least readily identify with? What people group in your community do you not have any similarities with? That you don't have anything in common with, that you would not readily, warm to necessarily. And I'm not talking about the witches and the occultists that are up in the hills, right? That's not what I mean by that. I'm not talking about the bikie club down the road, okay? And hey, if you're called to that, great. But I'm saying in a broad sense, sometimes we tend to only ever try to make contact with people we naturally know very well. Sometimes that's not the most fertile ground. And how are we ever going to learn how to really get to know people well if all we ever do is tend to go to the people that we most easily and naturally connect with. Challenge yourself to think about a people group that you find it difficult to connect with. Why? Why would I even suggest that? If you want to learn to know how to really mingle, don't just mingle with the people you find easy to mingle with. Make sense? Does that make sense to you? I don't know if it makes sense to you. But if you want to grow and know how to mingle effectively, don't just do it with the people you naturally do. Yes?
For the stranger group that you can't, that you can't deal with,
Mm-hmm.
are you suggesting that group, because since you can't cope with them, means that you naturally have lots of questions to ask them without having to work and try and find questions?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Yeah, you've got lots of questions to ask, but the part of the thing is that we need to learn how to effectively mingle. And learning how to get to know people isn't done most effectively when we just get to know the people we naturally easily get to know. We want to develop the technique and the ability to genuinely get to know people well. Try people that are difficult. Right? So that's the first part. The second part is with the listening, and I've got some practical tips for you here. Listening is that learning to identify people's needs. Learning to identify people's needs. After mingling, we need to listen to them, and this all depends on knowing how to ask good questions and taking that time to build genuine relationships. And so, I won't go through this today, but sometimes what we try to do as Adventists is we try to get right to the core beliefs of people. We try to ask questions about what, when we're talking questions about religion, it's core belief stuff. We need to understand that you can't get straight there. You need to work through the layers of people, which is people's human commonalities, all those things, work, health, travel, hobbies. Behavioural patterns, what is it that you do with your time? Personal choices, why do you choose to do those things that you choose to do? What is it that you value that makes you want to choose to do that? And then what is it, your belief, that makes you value that particular thing? That's how we get down to that level. Listen and to ask good questions. And surveys are a really great way to get insights into the needs of the community. And we need to know who are the gatekeepers of our community and who are the stakeholders of our community. They are the people who understand the community best and also have resources as well. So I want to ask you, who are some of the people we can, if we're going to be wanting to get to know our community well, go out and do some surveying. And I really challenge you in your church groups to think about making a commitment to surveying your community, not just once to get an idea, but making a habit of it, to continually put a schedule of surveying your community. If you want to know who the people are that you can survey, let me get some ideas. What are some of the people that are both the gatekeepers and the shareholders, the stakeholders, so that your community really understand it best? Give me some ideas. Who you think? Yeah, down the back. Administrators? Yep. Really good. Council? Yep. Local council? Any other ideas? Police? Really good, yeah? Welfare organisations? Yep. Absolutely. Hairdressers. Why hairdressers? It's actually a brilliant point. I didn't put it up in there, but thank you. So we often do this. We go residents, knock on doors. The problem with residents, you ask them what's the needs of the community. They don't necessarily know their community. Why do we think that just because they live there, that they understand anything about it? Do they shop there? Maybe. Do they work there? Probably not, right? So just because you're a resident in an area, think about it, doesn't mean you understand it terribly well. Yes? Community centres, absolutely. Yeah, they've got project officers, good thinking. So you've probably got some I don't have, but think about these. Local community service groups, Rotary Alliance, Anglicare, any of those, they're constantly dealing with needs in the community. They're service clubs, that they've got resources too. When you actually connect with them as well, you'll often find that they'll be like, oh wow, you want to be able to do stuff, we've got resources, we don't have all the time to do everything. Hey, how about we give you some money, and here's a need, here's some money, go and do it, or here's some resources. Local government, state and federal government reps as well. They're constantly having people tell them what's going on in their community. The police, why the police? Because they're dealing with stuff in the community all the time. School principals. They know the families of the area and the communities as well. Next one. Librarians. You know, today libraries are often community hubs where lots of activities happen, not just people borrow books. They've got a lot of contact with different people groups and groups. Business owners. Think about your pharmacists, your cafe owners, your hairdressers, people who talk to people, who see the community and know what's going on in the community. Think about some of these people groups. They're some of the main ones that we need to go out and survey. And as I said, don't just do one-off surveys, do a secondary survey and then say to people, how did we go? We developed a program, we ran a program. How do you think it went? Did you even know we ran the program? How effective was our advertising? And so forth. So there's a few things for you guys to think about. What we've got is we've got some questions. And what I want you to do is try to get into your groups of, hopefully your churches, if people from your church are here, get into groups of your churches or your friends. And there's some questions on your sheet of paper there, and spend some time. How much time? Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Let's give Matt a hand for the presentation. So, as Matt's just alluded to, on our handouts that we've received today, under Module 1, Preparing the Soil, we've got 4 questions there. And we're not necessarily going to go in depth on these questions today, but what we want is for you to take these home and consider some of the principles that are being shared, and then ultimately how you are going to, in your personal evangelism, in your church groups and other organizations, meet these needs. And so if you need a pen, the team there have some pens. If you want to just put up your hand, and we might be able to distribute some pens if you need them. We're just going to take a couple of minutes now. I'll just call out. We've got a couple of hands up. If you just raise your hand nice and high, we'll get a few pens out to you. Very good. So we're just going to take a few minutes now just to answer some of these questions here, and you can even take the opportunity to ask Matt some questions as well, because it's really good that we actually wrestle with this material. We're not just trying to ingest today, but we're trying to wrestle and get some robust thought and discussion happening as well. And so we are thinking specifically here about preparing the soil. And so some of the questions that we have here is, what is the greatest barrier to me in preparing the soil and being committed and prepared to go out and do the work? So that's the first thing that we are reflecting on this afternoon. What is the greatest barrier? When Matt was presenting this information, the first thing that came to my mind is that I am unwilling a lot of the time to actually get my hands dirty. I'm not willing to get down into the soil. I'm happy to go pick an apple off the tree, but actually getting down into the soil and getting my hands dirty, getting my clothes dirty, that's annoying. That's frustrating. That's something that stood out to me from Matt's presentation. You'll be able to reflect on your personal journey. What is the greatest barrier? And we're just going to take a few minutes now. If you want to run through these questions in groups, if you came in the same car, you can mingle around a little bit now, get to know one another a little bit. We're just going to take the next 5 minutes to work through these questions, and you can get some discussion going. If you're here in a church group, it might be a good opportunity for you to get together with other church members and think through some of the things that you might want to do here. We're just going to take a few minutes now just to work through these questions. You can either do it personally or in groups and get some discussion going. Thank you.
venue so I can adjust it here. So there's a soft.
Anything else? Anything else? Come on. You have the opportunity to sit at my feet. Come on. At my feet. Not hesitate.
Yeah.
So you want a survey? Yeah, okay. So I'm thinking like a few practical questions, maybe around location, central, like maybe is the training practical? What was the key standout for you? What changed? Just a few things like that that'll kind of give us some feedback that'll help us. Yeah. What? Yeah. What was the main thought